Welcome to another episode of Mind the Gap. As you may be aware, Mind the Gap exists to bridge the knowledge gap for learning and development leaders through insightful conversations with thought leaders. We want to provide actionable insights, real-world experiences, and forward-thinking perspectives to empower L&D professionals to drive measurable impact in their organizations. So I've been really excited about this one because I'm being joined by Jon Roche, who is currently the head of learning and development at Fitness First, previously L&D manager at Ask Italian, hopefully a keen chef too. At the moment, his focus is to reinstall a new L&D function in Fitness First to support the business operations. He's got a passion for helping team members realise their career goals and achieve everything they want to professionally. A big welcome, Jon. Great to have you on.
Thanks a lot, Harry. It's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. I know you were at LearnTech yesterday, so hopefully feeling recovered after the madness that is.
Legs are a bit sore from all the walking, but no, it was really good. Really good year this year. Lots of AI.
Yeah, not surprising, is it? A lot of talk about AI. We might talk about that a little bit later, or we might try to avoid it. Who knows? We'll see where we go in terms of our conversation. I know that you come and we've talked about previously a really interesting topic that I think our listeners will be excited to hear about, which is around starting from scratch, installing an L&D function in a business without one. I know that's where you've kind of landed at Fitness First, right?
Yeah, that's right. Fitness First has been through quite a few changes over the last sort of 5-6 years. And obviously, COVID hit the fitness industry incredibly hard when no one could come to gyms. And at that point, a lot of the L&D function, 90% of it was stripped away from the business, and what remained was all done through external providers. So yeah, my role has been to come in and try and put together a program that supports all the business initiatives going forward and the whole business strategy we've got now for the next sort of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited to jump into that into more detail. What we like to do, though, at the start is get into some quick-fire questions just to warm us up and the audience up and hopefully can get us excited about some of the topics. So, obviously, just come back from LearnTech. Maybe this has changed, I don't know. But what's the one thing that's consuming lots of your thinking at the moment, Jon?
A lot of my thinking at the moment is consumed with mostly health and safety, I'll be honest. In the fitness industry, that's a big part of what we do. And actually, health and safety training is really difficult to make exciting, engaging, interesting. So I've been looking at how we can look at different ways of delivery to really upskill on health and safety.
Nice, understandable. It's a key part of what we have to do, right? And we have to make it relevant and have an impact. So I can understand why it's consuming your thinking. Yeah. All right. What's one piece of recent learning that everyone who is listening could benefit from?
I actually went back and reread Start with the Why a few weeks ago because it's something I think I'd lost sight of. And I think that knowing your end goal before you really get into it, for me, relearning that and almost going back to that has been, opened my mind a little bit.
I'm going to make a little bit of a rustle and noise, but I've actually got his more recent one, which is called The Infinite Game.
Which I've got on my shelf and haven't had time to read.
Yeah. It's great, actually. I really enjoyed it. And just thinking about things being, we often set ourselves goals that have kind of a more, what's the right word to say here? I'm struggling now, Jon. I'm trying to say what I'm thinking about. I'll probably leave that. I'll come back to it. Maybe cut that bit out altogether. We'll move on to the next question, shall we? I'll just put a pause in here so it's easy to cut out. That's great. And so what's one thing you wish you'd known earlier in your career that you'd bank now if you were starting again?
Oh, I think earlier in my career, I think the thing I would have liked to have known was the impact my actions have on others. I think if I'd have realised that earlier, it would have helped me do things differently earlier in my career.
And is there something that specifically jumps out that you're thinking about there, Jon, in terms of an impact or a downstream impact that you've had, or is that more at the broader level in terms of your role inside the organisation?
So I think there was a couple of instances early in my transition from chef to L&D where actually I probably didn't put enough weight behind how much people respected my opinions and knew that I was an expert in the subject matter. And I used to question everything I did too much. And I think had I realised earlier on, I'd been promoted into that position because of my skill set and because of what I brought to the table, that would have helped me develop a little bit quicker.
Yeah. I think everyone has a little bit of that, don't they? Questioning. I think it's sometimes good as long as it doesn't overtake all of your thinking, right? And that's definitely a challenge for people. That's probably a whole nother podcast. We could talk about that in relation to that topic.
Yeah, I think my imposter syndrome was definitely real.
I think that's something that I think you're not alone. I think a lot of people go through a process of not being absolutely certain of their capability, and some people are like, I can't believe that. Like, you know what you're doing inside an organization, what impact you're having. It's kind of want to go and say, come on, you've got it, don't worry. But yeah, so look, I appreciate those quick fire questions and answers. Let's get into the meat of the topic today. So we're going to talk about starting from scratch, installing an L&D function in a business that didn't have one, and obviously talking about fitness first here at the moment. So one thing that would be really interesting to talk about is how has the L&D function been adopted by the business, and what has been the main barriers, if any, in terms of your process?
Yeah, so adoption's gone reasonably well. I think the changes that I brought in have generally been accepted as good. Now, change is always difficult because it takes time for people to adopt. But what I brought in was more structure to things like inductions. Actually, now we've got a structured, this is what we need to do for an induction. Health and safety training is less ad hoc and it's quite diarised now in terms of when we should be doing what, and external courses are all diarised for, next 12 months. I brought a lot more structure to everything, and then also introduced a new learning platform. The old platform was very clunky, quite old-fashioned. It was mainly a checkbox exercise of, have you read this? Have you read that? That was it. There was no real interaction in it. So we wanted to bring in something very interactive that our teams could feel like they were actually learning from rather than going through the motions. And the platform went down incredibly well. So Calidus as a launch has gone down really, really well. But also the wider part of that, being able to book events through it rather than using Excel spreadsheets and things like that. Just the almost quality of life improvements when you've got a full-fledged platform makes a huge difference to actually getting people engaged with training.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your positive sentiment about Canada, but obviously that's not the purpose of this conversation. So but I do appreciate it. So obviously the platform is obviously one big part of changing, the direction. What other steps did you take to go on that journey to ultimately get buy-in across departments? Were there any other kind of practices and processes that you put in place?
Yeah, I mean, buying from other departments was always, depending on the department, it changed. So the guys who are in our health and safety team bought in almost immediately because it took a lot of pressure off what they were doing, in that I was then working with a couple of external suppliers, but also bringing more training under our own umbrella. And, we were going to deal with it in-house. So those guys bought in very quickly, and especially once they saw how we could present training differently. It wasn't Word documents and PDFs uploaded that people read through. It was a more interactive way of adding some knowledge checks in midpoint of a course to actually say, have you fully understood this before we move on to the more complex elements? So they bought in straight away. Ops were a little bit hesitant, I'll be totally honest. Ops guys didn't see what was wrong with the old platform and the old way of doing things. Bringing them around is the power of reporting, and leaned into what they like. They like some data, some very hard data of this is what's actually happening. This is how we can change things. So actually leaning into the reporting really helped me on that one in terms of this is our current sort of uptake on training. Balancing that against the old platform. The old platform was actually much harder to even tell who'd done the basic induction training, let alone any higher level. Whereas I had full data on exactly who'd done what course, how long they'd spent in the course, how many times they'd failed any questions. All that sort of data really helped the ops guys get on board with it. I also had to engage external suppliers in the changes, which is something I think sometimes gets overlooked a little bit, that actually any changes to our process has quite a big impact on what they do with us as well.
Yeah.
So engaging external suppliers in the changes I was making in terms of what content we wanted from them, how we wanted it delivering, how it would fit in with the overall strategy for learning. That took probably a bit longer than I expected to get those guys fully on board and engaged, because they thought what they were doing was good enough and fitted really well, where actually I wanted it to fit in a slightly different way with the overall bigger picture.
And when you look inside the organisation, outside of the kind of departments, you look at maybe role levels from maybe more individual contributors versus, let's say, managers, etc. Were there any differences that you saw in the way to approach them, or the adoption that you saw as you worked with those different individuals?
Very much so. So a lot of our management team, our heads of department, management team in club actually adopted it really quickly, got on board with it, saw the power in the changes. We have a role which is a hybrid PT role, so they work part-time for the company and then they PT part-time. Those guys, it's a little bit harder to get them on board with stuff like this, because actually they're less engaged with what's going on within the business, because they're trying to build their own PT company at the same time. So actually, to increase their engagement, what we did was I worked with the head of fitness and his team, and we put in what we've called a PT Academy. So actually what we've done is merged what we want from a fitness first element with what they want to upskill them to run their own business. We've merged it into a single learning pathway that they can go on. That's really helped improve engagement there as well.
So just to help understand that, is that a case of you've started to blend some of what's really important to fitness first, as well as what they want to develop in terms of their own capability and acumen to be able to run their own PT business?
Exactly that. So we talk, what do we want them to know from our point of view? So we want them to be able to teach our signature classes. We want them to be able to interact on the gym floor, things like this. But then what do they want to know? Well, they want to know, how do they do digital marketing for their own business? How do they, present themselves? How do they actually make their business viable from a financial point of view? So we then give them that support blended with what we want. That really helps engage them, because they feel like they're getting more out of it for themselves. It's not just about, you have to do this because you work for us. It's now, we're helping you develop yourself and your own personal brand. And I think that sort of more personalised approach to each role is the approach we're now going down for all roles in the business. And it was kicked off through that one.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic, because a lot of organisations that we speak to have a challenge around engagement generally, and I think that's the big thing that L&D are always fighting against. And I think that sometimes a new platform might be looked at as a pathway to do this, and it certainly can help, especially if it's easy to use. But I think that what you just highlighted there is one of the things that is often overlooked, that actually, and I love that. I love the way that actually that kind of hybrid role has meant that you've done this. But ultimately, if you're putting elements of additional value that are going to add to an individual's capability or life, or that they're passionate about, onto a platform, actually there's a reason to come back and use it again and again, right? And actually, rather than it just being a case of, oh, I've got to go and do the things that I've got to do about my role, if they're upskilling and reskilling around specific areas of focus that maybe are either future facing or relevant to, in this particular example, maybe another part of their life and role outside of your organization, how valuable is that? It's a really exciting way to engage your people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, realizing the power in that has helped us almost shape our learning strategy for the rest of the business as well. Once once myself and our head of fitness had scoped this out, the light bulb moment for me was, well, why are we only doing this with this one role? Other roles in the business could benefit from this sort of way of presenting the learning to them as well. So yeah, we're currently looking at a whole strategy for our learning pathways.
Yeah, it's interesting how that has become a catalyst for a broader outreach in terms of that. I do think that's something for, hopefully for our listeners, it's something that hopefully just resonates. You know, there's a reason for people to come into the platform and start to upskill, reskill themselves and develop new capabilities. So it all sounds like, you know, it's been a very positive start, John, but I guess as often part of a learning curve is failing, right? And
Yeah.
you know, sometimes have to make some mistakes. And the whole idea of this podcast is to help people understand that there's some opportunities, but there's obviously some mistakes that are made. Are there any failings or
Yeah.
issues or challenges that you've gone through that maybe our listeners could benefit from hearing from you, that this has happened and this went a bit wrong, and actually by doing that I learned this and we managed to move forward?
Yeah, I've definitely, there's been pitfalls over the time we've been building this new pathway. I'd say probably the main one and the biggest one was just relying on what I was told rather than going to find information for myself as well. So, when I was brought in, I was kind of, each department said, this is what we need from L&D, this is what we need. And I started working on that and built pathways and things based on that. And then when I went and read the actual job descriptions for the roles within our clubs, half of what I've been told didn't actually fit with the jobs and wasn't there, and we didn't need, or we didn't have the right information in there. So yeah, I think just relying on that hearsay was probably my biggest mistake, was just relying on what people were saying. What I then did was almost scrap everything I'd done in the first few months, slowed it down, went and looked at job descriptions, and then went and spent time actually with the people doing those roles in the clubs.
Yeah,
Then came up with the new pathways that actually fit the roles that they're doing. So yeah, that was probably my biggest stumble at the beginning, was almost the assumption that, heads of department definitely know what the department is doing, and they know overall, but once you get into the minutiae of actually what does this person need to know to fulfill that role, there was a disconnect there. Yeah, that was a big old mistake.
this might be something that is I don't know if this is uncomfortable for people to say, but do you think that's some of the pressure of coming into a new organization and wanting to make an impact immediately and being like, I'm going to go and speak to the people that are in senior positions and go and go and do something,
Yeah,
versus when you then kind of reversed it, you're like, I've actually done something that's going to make an impact to the people that at the receiving end.
I think that's right. I think it's I land in an organisation. It's this is what we want to achieve. Let's go and do it. And what I probably should have said was, well, let's slow down. Let's actually scope it more fully, and then we'll put some timelines onto things, and then we'll start to look at how do we create impact within the teams, not just what you want there, but actually we need to impact the teams as well, and we need to make sure that whatever we put on that platform resonates with their job role and what they do on the day-to-day. So yeah, I think almost coming in and trying to look like I'm achieving straight away was probably one of the mistakes I made.
It's natural. It's natural though, right? For everyone, you feel that. There's an inherent pressure of coming in and wanting to make an immediate impact. But it's great to hear your openness, and shows obviously your kind of growth minded outlook in terms of, I made a mistake there, but also I love the fact that we're talking about going to the end user, your customer inside your organization, and going and saying, hey, what's really needed? I see in your job description, there's a number of different elements here, but what's most important to you, and then playing that back and providing value. So I think that's a massive learning. I hope that everyone will be interested in hearing about. And I think that it sometimes can be so easily overlooked, because actually that's quite hard, isn't it? It's actually effort to go and do that and have those conversations. It's easier to take a direction from someone and go after that path, but actually going to the kind of source of the information is actually harder, and so probably sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, and I think I think the value that can be added from talking to the people actually doing those roles, and the even to the point of this is your job description, you find out that actually the 3 or 4 things at the top of that description they never do. So they're not interested in learning about any of that because it's not part of their actual day-to-day role. And that then leads into bigger conversations within the organisation of, well, why is it in the job description if they're not? And then, it snowballs. But actually going to the teams and talking, for me, was also a way to get buy-in to the changes. Because, if they feel like they've played a part in shaping what the learning is going to look like, they're much more likely to then buy into it and actually follow those pathways that have been put together because they know that it's going to fit what they need to know.
Yeah, you're taking them on the journey with you, right? Yeah, I love it. And it's definitely something that I hope I try to do as well. When you're trying to work through change, if people feel like they've been part of working on that change with you, then they'll help support it and go on the journey. But again, it's difficult, organizations, thousands of people, there's a lot of people to take on the journey. It's not an easy path to go on, is it? And often your team can be quite a small team, obviously depending on the organization, and you've got a lot of impact to make as well, right?
Yeah. And the where you position that impact, I think, is really important as well. My main focus as I landed and for the last 12 months has been teams in club. And, I've had people at head office saying, oh, when are we going to get more? And when are we going to get more? And I'd love to deliver that. But actually, I think from a strategy point of view, we need to get our teams in club who actually work with the members and are member facing. We need to get those guys really comfortable with what's expected of them and what they do. And then we can phase into, right now we can look at head office and we can do some more training with these guys. But I think where the impact or where the change has the most impact has also been something that we've tried to focus on.
Yeah. That probably leads in really nicely to talking a bit more about impact. And I think that for everyone in L&D, trying to prove ROI or measurability of impact and outcomes is absolutely central to saying, well, you're doing all this work and activity, what impact is it actually having? So has it been established that the new L&D function is providing a good ROI on the investment?
So it's been established. There's been a change, definitely. Probably the bigger metric that we've used in terms of that is actually staff turnover.
Okay.
So when I joined the business, staff turnover was somewhere just over 70%. And actually, we've managed to reduce that by 10% in 12 months, which is a pretty decent figure. Not where we'd want to be. We do want to bring that down even more. But we see that as an indicator that development is now keeping people a little bit more engaged with their roles, a little bit more engaged with the business, and hopefully engaged with what we're doing in the future. And I think, with me planning ahead now, they can see what's coming for the next 6 months in terms of development opportunities. And that then people will stick around and say, actually, I do want to stay because I want to learn about this and this and this. Definitely staff turnover has been one of our big metrics to sort of balance against what difference does an L&D function actually make in the real world.
Yeah.
That's been the big one.
And I know we started with a bit about adoption and engagement and the process, and we now moved on to kind of outcomes really. When you came into the business, and obviously you've identified that your customer, the end users, actively engaging with their own customers are the right place to focus. Did you identify that kind of churn as one of the key outcomes that you were going to be focusing on as part of that strategy at the start of you going in and working through your key focuses?
Yeah. I identified that fairly quickly through talking to mainly our finance department, strangely enough. But from talking to finance and looking at our member retention in clubs, there was a correlation between clubs that retain staff and clubs that could retain members. So actually, the longer staff stay around, the longer members stay around. So straight away, what one of your measures needs to be is, well, if we can retain our staff, we should be able to have a knock-on effect in terms of retaining members in those clubs as well. And if we can do that, then that takes a lot of pressure off club teams in terms of sales and things like that. The net member movement ultimately increases really quickly. So yeah, I think looking at staff turnover as one of our metrics was highlighted fairly quickly in terms of we want to hold on to the best people that we can. And we want to make sure that they feel valued as part of the wider organisation. And, as part of that, we then engage sort of the fitness team in terms of, well, how do we then upskill these guys and keep the upskilling going to make sure that they feel invested in and that we're actually investing in their skills constantly and they're professionally being developed. So we now have a program with the fitness team of regular updates to our fitness program, which includes them being trained on new classes, things like this, new products that we bring into the business, and they all get trained on it. So that has then helped improve that retention as well.
Yeah, I think it's great. You can see the clear line, can't you, between what you've been programmatically after. Maybe again, you're honest. I started maybe slightly in the wrong place. You've come back to where you're going to make the biggest impact, align with retention. You're going to impact the individuals that have an impact on your customer. Then there's a direct line to ultimately revenue and money being generated for the business. So you can start to say, you can clearly kind of draw the line, which is exciting, I think, for anyone listening in terms of trying to get to that place where you've picked obviously a key metric, having had conversation with finance, which is another thing that probably L&D need to have more conversations with in terms of some of those key metrics that are trying to be impacted, and started trying to work out those lines that you can draw in terms of your programmatic approach to impacting business outcomes. And obviously if revenue is being impacted positively, then it's a pretty exciting journey that you're going on.
Definitely, yeah.
So I guess outside of 10%, which I know you said, I know that you're not happy with 10% improvement, but it's still pretty good in a 12-month period, isn't it? Is there a goal that you set yourself, or are there any other wins or indicators of your progress against that kind of goal that you're working towards?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely set ourselves some targets in terms of staff retention. We want our retention rates to be industry leading. I think every business strives for that. So yeah, we want to reduce that staff turnover quite steadily. We're looking at sort of 20% this year to get us down to that 50% mark. And then the following year, we want to try and do another 15% to get us down to that. That would put us within industry sort of standards. And then we want to push on the following year for another 10% to get us to be industry leading. So we've got a bit of a strategy plan there in terms of, we know we're not going to be able to get to where we want to be next year. We've got to put our markers in place. And as long as we can keep on towards those, we think that that'll have a bigger impact in terms of teams, because then we can actually look at how do we then change the learning. Because if we're having to recruit fewer new starters, we can upweight our investment in terms of, we're going to invest in the high-end training, not investing in the low end, which is what we're doing now. Our investment is inductions, all the basics. What we want to do is shift that, so we put most of the investment into the higher end learning.
And that's more about continuing to develop the individuals around the core skill sets and capabilities on a more developmental path. So it goes back to almost what we were talking about before, right? Where they've got something that they're feeling that they're being invested in, and you're completely right, John. I think I said in one of the talks that we did the other day at LearnTech, but I think 94% of people say they leave organisations because of lack of development, and it's the number one reason. And I think that we've got to keep on coming back to, it's got to be right, it's got to be tailored, it's got to be relevant. And so going and speaking to your people and understanding what that looks like, and likewise the journey that you're going from role specific to future development, future facing development is critical in that.
Yeah, definitely. And we know that our the guys on the gym floor today are our general managers and our ops managers of tomorrow, and that's where our investment needs to be. Is we need to invest in those guys, give them the skills they need to become that next level, and then keep moving level on level, because ultimately they're going to help us grow the business. They're going to be almost the lifeblood of. They're going to live and breathe the business. The longer they stay with it, the more connected they feel to it. So yeah, there's definitely a pathway in terms of our retention and internal development programs that we want to start to make sure that people are moving through.
Yeah, I love that, and I think then when you've got more of those examples and stories to be able to tell about those individuals that have gone on those journeys that you can point to as part of it, it becomes a bit of a flywheel effect, because it's like I could be that, I can see myself getting to that place, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's exciting. It's something for us in Psychalidus that we've always had a kind of graduate scheme. We've got a number of individuals that started, including myself, who've gone through a journey over a number of years. But we've got lots of people that you can point to that have been here 5, 7, even 10 years. That have climbed up, been promoted, and so for us, it's great to be able to point to some of those people and be like, yeah, that this is the opportunity if you want to go on it. There's obviously elements of the role has to be available. It takes some hard work. Sometimes there's a bit of luck involved, but ultimately, if you want to go on that kind of growth path, there's an opportunity to do it. And if you've got the pathway to go after, I think that's as much of the excitement and buy-in that you probably get from people, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think having that and even just visibility on the pathways creates excitement. Previous guys that work for us now have worked for previous businesses who only found out about the pathways that were available once they'd handed the notice in. Suddenly, as a way of trying to keep them there, they said, oh, but you could do this and this. Whereas we were very upfront in terms of, well, this is what our pathway looks like. This is how we will support you. All we expect back in return is do your job well. So yeah, we don't hide anything either. We make sure that things are out there for our teams. They know what's available. They know where to come if they want any extra development. So yeah, it's a good way of engaging our teams and keeping them engaged with not only their own development but the development of the business as well.
Yeah. So we've kind of started to face forward in terms of, well, everything is facing forward in terms of where you're heading and the direction that you're wanting to take L&D. But where do you see the future of L&D at Fitness First? What's it going to look like?
Ooh, I mean, that's a big question. I actually see it as taking a bigger role within the business in terms of how we achieve the overall strategy. This year, we are repositioning sort of values and behaviours within the business. We've, our mission and vision, our marketing team have done a great job with, and we're in a really good place. We've added some values in there, some newer ones, which we're embedding with teams through this year. And I think then we're linking all of that through our learning. So actually all the learning links back to the values, which links back to the mission, which links to the vision. So I think it'll start to take a bigger role. And we're also definitely looking at different ways of creating the learning. So user-generated content is definitely going to start to play a part within the business. I see that as part of the future. I think ultimately the experts in the subject matters are already within the business and they're already doing things within the business. We just need to draw that expertise out and make sure it's shaped in the right way. So user-generated content is massively on my radar. And then, the buzzword of the last few days at Learning Tech, AI is going to play a part as well. What part that plays is still a little bit up in the air. I massively see the value in AI. I also see the danger in relying on it too much. I'm very aware that AI can only create from what's gone before it. It can't actually create anything brand new. So we do use it and we will continue to, but how we use it will probably evolve as well.
Yeah, I think that's it. the human element that needs to still come into AI, right? You can probably get yourself 70, 80%, sometimes maybe even 90% of the way there, but there's always going to be some level of human intervention to check at the moment anyway, and we'll see obviously how it progresses over time. But
Yeah, definitely. And I think, people I work with in L&D tend to be creative people anyway. So actually to create things, AI speeds it up, but probably doesn't add quite as much. Where I'd like to see more AI is actually in the back end of things. So actually AI driven reporting, I think would add an extra dimension because it would make reporting quicker, easier, more succinct. And over the last few days, I heard a lot about AI, but most of it was in the creation side of things. And I'm hoping at Learning Tech next year, there'll be more. This is AI in our reporting suite, and this is how we've built AI into the back end to speed things up and help you with what you're doing.
yeah, and it's definitely something that we're focused on, John. And I don't want to talk about calendars too much, but definitely right in terms of freeing up your time and being able to get data out more accessibly. And AI definitely has a part to play in that. Um, Something that you mentioned earlier, John, that I'm really interested in. You talked about marketing doing a fantastic job, which is always great to hear. Have you got a good partnership with marketing in terms of your working relationship and how L&D and marketing partner together to promote and support your
Yeah.
learning culture, or is that something that's developing?
It's developing. We do have a great relationship in terms of how we shape content and how we make sure that actually the branding is strong throughout content. Whichever part of the business it fits with, it's branded really well to fit with that part of the business. What we're now starting to work on is how do we internally market what's available in terms of development programs. So we started with our PT Academy program. That's actually grown into 3 programs now. So we offer one for people brand new to fitness, never any fitness training at all, to get them a PT qualification. Then our central academy that's already built, and we're actually working on building an alumni as well, which will be for people who've phased into freelance PT and technically don't work for Fitness First, but we want to continue their professional development as well. So that's grown from 1 academy to 3, and it's how we market those and make sure that actually everyone involved really knows what's available, where to find it, and we're working on that pathway at the moment. But yeah, the marketing team are incredibly supportive of what I want to do with the learning strategy and making sure that people are engaging with that strategy, and that it fits with all of our other marketing, and even fitting with our external marketing. We made sure that there's a through line through it all.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think another one of those engagement factors is it really needs to be consistent, visible, and make people aware, right? And it's easy to fall off people's radar, or as inside your organisation, you've got a large number of workers, and obviously working in a quite active participation versus desk based, for example, making sure you're getting the information to them. You do need the support of a marketing team to be able to get it out there and have the different touch points, right? It feels like it really helps with the engagement strategy overall.
Hugely, yeah, and I think it helps align actually the learning strategy with the overall marketing strategy. They'll let me know 6-8 months in advance. Actually, we're going to be marketing this part of the gym in 8 months' time, so we need to make sure we've got the skills in that area of the gym. So I can then put the learning behind that, and it works quite symbiotically, really. And we make sure that we're helping each other out to deliver the best for the members.
Yeah, it feels like the way you're operating. It's you've got the strategic elements of your vision, purpose, your values all firmly intertwined, and then looking at what you're working on both at a strategic level in terms of the levers from a revenue generation, customer retention, that side, as well as at the kind of more tactical level, you're then folding in. If we're going to be marketing here, you're then promoting and making sure you've got the skills and capability. It feels like you've got the you've got the layers completely built out. It feels like you're doing some really exciting stuff, John. But are there things that you're like, I wish I could do more of, or I really want to do this thing that I haven't been able to do yet, that you think would make a big difference? Are there any things that are jumping out at you that you're like, I'm not quite there yet, and I want to make sure I get done?
Yeah, there's definitely. I think there's always those dream scenarios of this is where I want to be focusing my time, and I think some of that is more of the softer skills for me. We tend to spend a lot of time on these are the skills you have to know. This is what supports your job. Actually, what I'd like to look at is more of the softer stuff of, well, how do you instigate a conversation with a member on the gym floor? How do you go over and talk to someone you've never talked to and start to engage them in something, in a really meaningful interaction that will mean a lot to them? I'd like to focus on that softer side of things and how do we upskill in terms of personal skills. Not quite there yet in terms of our time, but hopefully in the future we'll have development that will allow us to really focus on that, developing your own self in terms of how you interact with other people to get the best from every interaction.
Yeah, I think that's part of your brand, really, isn't it? In terms of that, one part is that you deliver a great product in terms of inside the gym and everything else around it. The other part is those interpersonal skills, the trust, the relationship, everything that you start to build up. And obviously, with your retention improving, you're going to see those things come into play.
What I'm hoping is we'll see that becomes more and more important as our retention improves. Those skills become more important, which will mean that it's easier for me to get the investment in that sort of training. At the moment, I talk to the guys, and everything is a cost. What's the cost of this? What's the cost of that? And I'm desperately trying to change that language to investment. It's not a cost; it's an investment in this, and this. But I think the more we retain people, the more that almost investment in, well, how do we make sure we retain more members? Now we're retaining staff, retaining members. It's all about interactions. It's all about making the member feel like part of a community. That's where our softer skills will come in, and that's where the investment in that sort of training should come in.
And something that you mentioned earlier, obviously, in relation to, you know, there's a cost of 10% improvement in retention is, there's a cost to the business associated with that. Um, you keep improving that as well as obviously improving retention of your customer as a result of that. Those conversations start to become easier for you in terms of that investment.
Definitely, yeah. There is definitely a cost in staff turnover. We know that we've sort of calculated what our rough cost is in terms of every member, the team member that we lose. So we know that if we can keep improving at the rate or a little bit faster than we are improving, that will offset some of the current L&D budget, which will allow me then to reinvest in more areas of the business and hopefully drive more of the skills that we want to be driving with the teams and making sure that the impact on the members is the biggest it can be.
Yeah. And is that an open dialogue that you've constantly got with the finance team and internally about the impact between, we're improving retention, you know, there's a direct line between, the effort that you're putting in from an L&D, the structure and strategy that you've put together, and ultimately that kind of hopefully becomes quite circular in terms of the benefit for the business.
Yeah, conversations amongst the leadership team are, they're quite circular in terms of, well, we've seen improvement here. That now allows us to look at this. Hopefully that'll drive more improvement, and then we'll have that same conversation around, we constantly review what's happened and then what the plan is for the future. And those conversations are getting a little bit easier now.
Yeah. Great. Well, look, I think it sounds like you're on a really exciting journey, going from starting from zero to where you are now, and already impacting business outcomes, which is so critical to carry on that investment in your people. Is there anything finally, John, that you'd like to share that you think would be really interesting for our listeners?
I think that the one thing is just it's what I said at the beginning that I've returned to, is that start with the why. I think me refocusing on what is it we want to achieve through having L&D in the business and what's our end goal. I think that's really helped me focus on what does the strategy need to be now, what will the strategy be in a year's time, and then what will it be in 3 years' time, to keep moving the business forward towards that ultimate goal that we want to get to, in terms of how we then interact with our teams from a learning point of view and the impact that has on the members from an experience point of view.
Yeah, brilliant. It's It's an exciting time. I think it feels like you've got lots that you're working on. Feels like you're doing some great work with both your people and in terms of the impact to the business. So I really appreciate that, John. Thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great to talk about it.